This is only a possible, I'm just giving you a possible explanation, which I think is the most likely. Okay. This is a guy, he's an English guy, I think, Nick Redfern. He's done research into this, and he's come up with a theory which I think is quite likely. Okay. And yeah, Christian apologist Guy Malone also thinks this, that what really happened in Roswell in 1947 was something that the American public in 1947 would not have been able to cope with. Okay. In brief, here is the theory. World War II came to an end in 1945. Okay. During the war, the Germans had developed high technology in connection with aeroplanes. For instance, the Horten HO-229 flying wing stealth plane. The Germans really had some very high-tech stuff at the end of the war, which, if the war had gone on much longer, they may have been able to use, and they would have turned things around completely. Okay. And after the war, German scientists previously working for Hitler were brought to the United States of America to continue their work for the good guys under the name of Operation Paperclip. And that's what wouldn't have been acceptable, really. That, German scientists who were actually members of the Nazi Party, even although it was denied, and so they brought them over. The reason it's called Operation Paperclip is that they actually paperclipped a totally artificial record of these guys over the top of their real records, the fact that they were Nazis, and just covered everything up. Okay. The President Harry Truman has specifically forbidden known party members from entering the United States, but in fact it was going on because these were the best scientists, and America and Japan and everybody was fighting over them at the end of the war. Okay. 1945, they continued their work in the states of Texas and New Mexico. Okay, New Mexico is there on the map. Okay, next. And that's where Roswell is, interestingly enough, quite near to the base where all this high-tech research is going on. Okay. In July 1947, okay, this mentioned before, pilot Kenneth Arnold saw rapid objects flying over Mount Rainier which skipped like saucers but did not look like saucers. He's showing a picture there of what they actually did look like, okay, which are very similar to some of the Nazi flying wing technology. It's quite possibly he saw some high-tech experiment going on, which nothing to do with aliens. And this is what he reported, okay. July 1947, the unknown ship crashes in the vicinity of Roswell. And according to eyewitnesses, this wasn't a flying saucer. It was that sort of shape. It wasn't actually a flying saucer shape. Okay. What about the bodies? Okay, small body, little face, bulging eyes, and big bald head. Okay, that's the description. That's what these things look like. Okay. And there's a disease called progeria, which means that people who've got this look like that. Human beings. It's just a genetic defect. And the one on the right is actually a South Africa. I don't know if he's still alive, but he was a South African pop star who actually exploited the fact that he looked like an alien. It's part of his. I can't remember his name. It's actually a genetic defect. They're actually born with this genetic problem, and it means they don't live very long. They don't live much more than 20, 25 years. But they're not affected mentally in any way. It's just completely a physical thing. Okay? So it's quite possible, in fact, that the government were using human guinea pigs. They were using physically handicapped people as human guinea pigs in certain high-altitude experiments. And one of these went wrong, and it crashed, basically. The memory metal, the aircraft was made of a certain metal, which if you crushed it, it went back to its original shape. And there's something now which is known as nitinol. It's a nickel titanium alloy, which actually has this property. It's if you crunch it and if you heat it up again, it all goes back to the original shape. But it was only developed in the 70s, or was it? Okay. But the first memory metal was discovered in the 1930s, which is well within the period. Okay. Military files on the development of this during the 1940s have disappeared. Okay, so really nobody knows. That was just something on the YouTube. There was this wire bent into this shape, and if you crushed it up and then heated it up in water, it would go back to its original shape. Okay? So, my postulated conclusions then. Former Nazi scientists now in America had worked on the development of a secret aviation technology in the 1940s. Okay. They were not averse to experimenting on humans, for instance, to elucidate the effects of low pressure, radiation, etc. at high altitude. Handicapped people were suitable for this purpose because no one would miss them. Okay, even although these people were not mentally handicapped, in fact, they were just physically handicapped. Okay. The Roswell incident was an accident during one of these experiments. Okay. So, the event at Roswell, therefore, was not an alien spaceship crash, nor demonic activity, but it was a human phenomenon. But it is possible that demons have exploited the situation in order to deceive people in new ways in the future. Okay. Watch the skies. That was, what was that? Dark Skies, I think that was that picture. It was a series, TV series about aliens. Okay, is this the last one? One last thing. Are you still coping? Yes, okay. One last thing. This again is a bit speculative.
Is it preacher's one last thing?
Pardon?
Is it a preacher's one last thing?
Maybe. Oh, preacher's one last thing. Yeah, it could be. Okay. Yes. What about UFOs in the Bible? On the one hand, certain authors want to find UFOs and aliens in the Bible. Ezekiel's vision, rapture of Elijah, and so on. Remember Erich von Däniken, Chariots of the Gods in the 70s probably. He claimed that Ezekiel's vision remember Ezekiel's vision at the beginning of the chariot coming down and all the eyes and the things was really a UFO and all this kind of stuff. He came up with his theory. Okay. On the other hand, some Christian teachers as well as secular researchers accept that modern UFO phenomena is of demonic origin, completely the opposite way around. Not that the Bible has UFOs in it, but UFOs are really demonic, which are in the Bible. Okay? Some of these think that human UFO alien hybrids are real. In fact, the same thing happened in the Bible. Now, this is a disputed passage in the Bible. The Nephilim, remember in Genesis chapter 6. What are the Nephilim? Chuck Missler believes that they are demon-human hybrids, for example. Okay, this is the passage in the Bible. Who are the Nephilim? I'll read it from here. When men began to increase in number on the earth and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful, and they married any of them they chose. Then the Lord said, My spirit will not contend with men forever. He is mortal. His days will be 120 years. The Nephilim, some translations have giants, were on the earth in those days and also afterwards when the sons of God went to the daughters of men and had children by them. They were the heroes of old, men of renown. Okay, that's about all there is. Okay, so what on earth does it mean, basically? It appears that the Nephilim are joint descendants of the sons of God and the daughters of men. But what does that mean? Who are the sons of God? Gods, aliens, demons, humans, grey aliens, whatever. Okay, what are they? Okay. There are three theories, well, four, but three very, very old theories as to what these mean. So I'd just like to mention these. The oldest one that we know about from the time of Jesus and just before, this is what the Pharisees believed, and this is what the early Christians believed. The sons of God are fallen angels, the daughters of men are human beings, and hybrid offsprings were born to them. That's what the Jews believed in Jesus' day, and that's what the early Christians believed. Okay? And this is the oldest known interpretation. In the book of Job, the sons of God refers to aliens. And there's a book which was popular among the early Christians, the book of Enoch. It wasn't written by Enoch. It was written in about the 1st century BC. But it deals with this situation. So, just a quotation from the book of Enoch, which confirms this theory here. And when the sons of God had multiplied in those days, beautiful and comely daughters were born to them, and the watchers, the sons of heaven, saw them and desired them. And so they said to one another, Come, let us choose for ourselves wives from the daughters of men, and let us beget for ourselves children. And they descended onto the peak of Mount Hermon. And it tells all about this rebellion in heaven, and it names all these demons, these fallen angels, and it gives all the details of the things that they did. Of course, it's complete fantasy, but you know, this is a book that was actually, thank God it didn't get into the Bible, because it was a disputed book, and it could have got into the New Testament, but it never did. The book of Enoch. Okay. So it was the teaching of some Jewish rabbis in Jesus' time, and it was the first teaching of early Christians. And we also know legends of other peoples. You know, the Greeks, the Greek gods had children with the daughters of men. There's all kinds of legends which would confirm this idea. However, negatives. According to Jesus, angels do not reproduce. And in the text, it was man's and not the angel's sin which brought God's judgment. And although the interpretation is very early, it's still late compared with the events themselves. We think, if we go back 2,000 years to the time of Jesus, this was the explanation. But the event itself was another 2,500 years earlier than that, because we're talking about the time before the flood. So in Jesus' time, they probably wouldn't have no better idea what this meant than we do. Okay. The next one, the next theory that was proposed was the two human lines. The sons of God are the sons of Seth, who are the godly line, and the daughters of men are the descendants of Cain, who are the wicked line. And it was sort of basically mixed marriages, interracial marriage or whatever. So these began to intermarry, and this made God very angry. This theory was postulated. What happened, I think it was certain pagan writers. It was during the time of the Emperor Julian. Constantine made Christianity the accepted religion of the Roman Empire. A little later, it was the Emperor Julian, who's known as Julian the Apostate, who went back to paganism. He didn't last very long. And during that time, there was a lot of anti-Christian literature. And they said, well, if Christians believe stupid things like, angels and humans having children together, then how can we believe what they say? And so they came up with an alternative theory, which was this theory. And Augustine actually accepted this theory, and therefore it became very popular. Okay, that's why. Positives, there's no need to postulate human and angel combinations. The flood resulted from man's sin, but personally I don't think this theory has very much going for it. It's really just not very believable. Okay. Negatives, the interpretation is not given by exegesis of the text itself, basically. Seth is not God, Cain is not Adam. By the time of the flood, the offspring of both lines were sinful. It only says Noah was righteous. It doesn't say his whole line was righteous. Men did not sin by getting married and having children. I mean, God commanded at the beginning to, marry and to produce children and to fill the earth. And so if that's all they were doing, then why is that such horrendous sin? It doesn't make sense. The interpretation only appears in the 5th century. To me, it's forced and artificial with no background analogy or basis. I don't like that theory. Okay. The third theory is the theory of divine kings. The sons of God were antediluvian rulers or princes who demanded worship for themselves. They practiced polygamy, choosing from the daughters of common men. So they had harems. They gathered the daughters of men. They produced strong offspring, and they demanded that they be worshipped as gods, basically. We don't have any antediluvian proof for this, but we know it happened after the flood very rapidly in many cultures. Okay. Positives, the cult of man and polygamy were already practiced. Okay, we hear about Cain building a city for his son. And we hear about can't remember the name, the guy from the line of Cain who had 2 wives. So polygamy was practiced. It was certainly known before the flood. There are ancient analogies from after the flood in Egypt and Sumer. In this case, spiritual beings didn't have children. It's just that the man claimed, the Egyptian pharaoh claimed to be the son of the god. He wasn't really, but he claimed to be a son of the god and that he had to be worshipped. If man is worshipped as God, this is idolatry and results in God's judgment. So that would, I think, be a very good reason for God sending the flood. If man was saying, I have to be worshipped as a god, it's a pretty bad, horrendous sin. The last days will be like the days of Noah, and the Antichrist will be worshipped as God. That's another reason why it's plausible. Okay. Negatives. It's a teaching of second century Jewish rabbis, and Christians have only really discovered it fairly recently, but it does go back to the 2nd century. It doesn't really explain the giants. Possibly, though perhaps none of the theories do. I don't know. Anyway, personally, I think this theory is the most likely. I don't want to be dogmatic about it because nobody really knows what this passage means, but I think this third one is the most likely, personally. Okay. For the sake of completeness, the 4th theory is the sons of God are aliens who came in spaceships. Okay. Right. I think we'll dismiss that one. I consider the divine king's theory to the most acceptable. The sons of God are therefore men, but, just as in the case of Roswell and the crop circles, people started something which demons later jumped on and just to increase the level of chaos. I think that's quite likely, because they know their time is short. Yes, and that really is the end. So that's all you ever wanted to know about.
Nephilim translate?
Well, the Hebrew root is naphal, which means fall, so it means fallen ones. It doesn't actually mean giants. And the Greek is gigantes, which means, it sounds like giants, but it actually means earthbound. So really, giants isn't necessarily the right translation of the word. Yeah. Okay.